Jinendra, welcome to Adults Class 2, Practical Applications of Jainism. Let's start with the Dokar mantra. Namo Arihantanam, Namo Siddhanam, Namo Ayaryanam, Namo Vijayam, Namo Isavasamanam, Eso Panchanamo Karo, Sava Bhava Pranasano, Mangalanche Savesim, Paranam Hari Mangalam. Jain comes from the word Jina. Who remembers what Jina means?
Victor.
Victor of over what?
Kashaya.
Oh. Victor over, you had it.
Kashaya.
Kashayas, passions, right? Victor over our enemies, and our enemies are our passions. Who remembers what the passions are?
Anger, greed, ego, and deceit.
That's right. Anger, ego, deceit, and greed. So it's actually important to know that that's the order. It's actually anger, ego, deceit, and greed. And the reason is in that order is because, hey, come on in. That's the order that you defeat them in. And the reason that's the order that you defeat them in is because that's the order from easiest to hardest to defeat them, right? Now, it may sound a little non-obvious, right? Like, why is it harder to defeat greed than ego? I mean, a bunch of us can't even get over ourselves. We can't stop. A bunch of us don't even believe that we're souls, right? So how is it easier? Why is greed the final boss of Jainism?
Greed is linked to the attachment. That's probably the hardest thing to let go of everything.
Because greed is linked to attachment. Yeah, that is one of the reasons. Anger can be caused by attachment, but greed causes attachment. And remember, attachments are what we're trying to get over. One of the reasons is that greed is subtle. Anger is not subtle at all. So it's easy to recognize when you're angry. It's very hard to recognize when you're being greedy. And you can be greedy about good things. You can be greedy about your spiritual progress, right? And so if you're greedy about that, then you will have not defeated greed. Greed is so subtle, you can be greedy about relationships. Remember the story of Gautam Swami, right? You can be a learned monk, be practicing Jainism for 30 years, somebody saved your soul, and you're brothers with that person for 30 years, and you still don't understand that that is exactly what's holding you back. Hey, come on in.
Hey.
We're talking today about why greed is the final boss of Jainism. The order that you defeat your passions in are anger, ego, deceit, and greed. Another reason, so it's hard to see that you're being greedy. Another reason is that greed fuels the other passions. Greed fuels anger and ego and deceit. I think it's easy to see that you can lie because you're greedy, right? Maybe you're greedy about money, material things, relationships. That causes you to lie, right? But lying doesn't cause you to be greedy, right? Greed causes you to be prideful. And greed causes anger. For example, if there are obstacles to your desires, whatever you're attached to, it causes anger. Anger doesn't necessarily cause greed. And so it reinforces the other ones. That's why it's one of the hardest ones to get rid of. Another reason is that, as you said, it strengthens attachment. That is, anger is caused by attachment. You might be attached to something and somebody takes it away, and that's why you get angry. And just like we said, greed causes the other things, well, greed causes attachments, which can cause you to lie and cause you to have anger about things. Another example is that greed is insatiable. When you're angry, whenever the cause of your anger goes away, your anger usually subsides. When you're greedy, if you get what you want, do you stop being greedy? No, you get more greedy, right? So it strengthens itself and it's insatiable. There's not enough wealth or material possessions to satisfy the greed of one person, let alone everybody on this earth, right? And paradoxically, the only way to satisfy greed is not by feeding it, it's by curbing it. That's the only way you can satisfy it. It's not the same way with like lies. You know, when you lie, I guess that's true though. When you lie, you tend to lie more. When you get angry, once the cause of your anger is gone, you don't tend to keep being angry about it. Another thing, remember we talked about Monia karma, which is the king of all karmas, which is deluding karma. It is the king of all karmas because it keeps you ignorant, because you can't tell the difference between right and wrong. Greed is a little bit of the same way. It clouds your rationality and it clouds your judgment. That is, you might make different decisions when you're under the influence of greed than you would otherwise. But you feel totally normal. You can't be like, when you're angry, you can be like, I'm angry, I shouldn't talk to my spouse, I shouldn't talk to my kid. I'm angry right now, I need to go take a drive, take a walk. When you're being greedy, you can't tell. And so it will subtly affect your decisions in ways that anger, ego, and deceit won't. Questions or comments about that?
I think the first question that you asked, that why is it so difficult to conquer greed, right? And I was thinking about, maybe it comes from the evolutionary nature of us as human beings, right? Like if you've seen some documentaries about how we consume food or in general anything, that's the way human beings evolved. We did not have abundance of food. For example, we used to scavenge, right? And then the reason why there is people gobbling food right now is because of the evolutionary mindset that we had, that get as much as you can because tomorrow you might not have anything. So the problem is that the root cause of why greed has become, and then that kind of penetrates into other areas of life, wealth and houses and cars and all of that. But ultimately, it is the evolutionary nature of human beings that actually caused greed to be the most difficult to conquer.
Or maybe fear, you can say fear.
Yeah, or maybe fear of not getting that tomorrow, so just grab it today, right?
That's true.
No, the problem with that is that you aren't a human being.
Yeah, that was the other thing that our mind was telling me. That's right. Yeah.
So you can't blame it on being human because
Yeah.
you're not a human. A human being is what the body that you're trapped in. You've been trapped in other bodies. And certainly it's one of the things we fight against is that hard wiring of the brain, which is the human part. But we have to remember that we're souls, and that's one of the ways to overcome this.
Yeah.
Another reason that greed is the final boss of Jainism is that it is the most binding of the passions because it introduces the most heaviest band. Who remembers what band is?
Bonding karma.
So band is how intense the bond of the karma is to your soul, right? So when you have anger or ego, deceit, they also bind karma, they also do band. But greed is more enduring because it involves deliberate and repeated actions driven by your strong desires. Because when you get greedy, when you get what you want more. This is that repeated action. That maybe sometimes you lie and you stop lying. Maybe sometimes you get angry and you stop being angry. But with greed, that same greed forces you to do the same things over and over and over for your entire life. And so the band is extremely intense. And so that's one of the reasons that greed is the final boss of Jainism.
But is it like a vicious circle, right? Like you did a bad karma, so now in this current stage of your life, you're more jealous, less self-content, you're more greedy. Because you're greedy, you are making more worse karmas, and then they are going to come back to you. So it's like just kind of breaking the cycle.
I'm sorry, but you're absolutely right. That's the worst news ever. Your suffering causes more suffering. That's why we say it's papanu bandhu pap, right? That's why you're stuck in this cycle of life and death. That's why you're stuck being ignorant. That's why Monia karma is the king of all karmas, because it keeps you from perceiving the truth. It keeps you from knowing what is right and what is wrong. And this greed will keep you on this earth forever. It will keep you away from moksha forever if you let it. And what happens is, sometimes it's an accident. Some people have a moment of truth, and they realize that Jainism is real, and they hang on to it, and they come back to it, and they think about it, and they live an examined life, and then they can break out of it. Sometimes it's purposeful. Some people survey different religions and see which one is best for me, which one seems closest to the truth. And they start taking steps on the right path to spirituality. But that first step is the hardest, because it's like you were born in a forest, and the only thing you know is the forest. Everywhere you go, left, right, up, down, north, south, is just this dark forest. And then you come across these people, and they say, how do you get out of this forest? And you say, what do you mean out? The forest is the entire world. There's no out of the forest. What is out of the forest? And they say, no, there is a path out of this forest. I know a path. First you deny it. You say, there's no path. What are you talking about? There's no path. And then you say, well, maybe you might accidentally take a path in the step in the right direction, but you won't keep going in the right direction because you don't know that there's a way out. So it was just an accident. So then it's like you just take a step randomly back, or you take a step randomly left, or you take a step randomly right. That's how hard it is to get out of this cycle. And that's why we should consider ourselves very lucky, and very lucky to know the truth and to realize that it is the truth. And then we have to apply the truth, and then we have to continue applying the truth. It sounds exhausting. It is exhausting. But it is the only way. There is no other way. Because the only other way is that you go round and round in this dark forest, not believing anybody when they tell you there's a way out, not knowing there's a way out, and thinking that's all there ever is, and that's all there ever will be.
So if you are going through grief and you recognize it, how do you get out of it?
Great. How do we get out of grief? It's in the book, right? Let's see. How do we get out of grief? Who knows?
I guess if we go step by step, control on Krodh, Man, Maya, maybe one day we will reach it.
Well, yeah, you do go in that order. You eliminate in that order, but you're supposed to work on all of them all the time. It's Santosh, page 96. What is Santosh?
Is it like self-contentment?
Contentment, that's right. All right, how we get out of grief? Santosh, contentment. Contentment, the opposite of contentment is greed. Therefore, becoming greedy is unnatural because contentment is one of the qualities of your soul. So we talked about all this. The more you get, the more you want. Quotes from scriptures if you want to be that. What
So
greed
a
does.
colleague of mine
how
actually
much
gifted me a book, and the title of the book literal is "Die with Zero."
Yeah.
I'm not started reading the book yet, but he was giving me an abstract out of the book, and ultimately the book is all about this question that you asked, how do we get rid of the greed, is to keep that in mind, that ultimately we're going to die with zero. Generally in all cultures, not our culture, death is considered as a taboo, like nobody wants to talk about it, but it's an eye-opener in some sense, right? And that, to me, that's a very practical way to get rid of the shackles of greed.
All right, so very good. Thank you. The first way to get rid of greed is to practice aparigraha. What is aparigraha?
Non-attachment.
Non-attachment, right?
Yeah.
How do we practice non-attachment?
Try to minimize your needs, minimize your wants.
That's right.
Needs.
Yeah.
Try to minimize your wants. How do we minimize our wants?
Like for example, if you want to buy clothes, you already have enough dresses and for us.
Right.
So
You start appreciating what you do have,
yeah.
and you
In
start.
this class, we actually did a very good exercise about this, I believe, in one of the classes, wherein if you buy something, you get rid of two of those things.
Right, right. That's how we minimize our wants. We think about what we did when we got other things in the past. Well, do we use those clothes that we got before? No, we don't. How many clothes do we need? Are there other people that need the clothes more? Yes, you can attack it from that way. You can remember everything is transitory, including your body, right? And when you acquire things, you just set yourself up for failure because you will become attached to those things. And when they inevitably break, or when your kid throws them away, or when something happens to them, you're going to be binding more karma to your soul because of that attachment. So why not just not get those things in the first place, right? So that's one of the major ways to fight greed, is to practice this aparigraha, or non-attachment, especially to material things. Another way is to cultivate this idea of santosh, or contentment. That is, try to be happy with what you have. Okay? Try to, instead of wanting more, try to learn. It's an exercise that you can do. You can just be happy with what you have. And you can accept all that you have. And so when people say, I don't know how those Tirthankars and those stories did it, how do you just accept food that is given to you? And if no food is given to you, you just don't eat. Well, that's practicing contentment, right? They're happy if they get it, and if they don't, they're still happy, right? That's how you, and so you can kind of live your life like that. Another way we combat greed is with mindfulness and self-discipline. I've been talking your head about that off about that for years, right? You practice mindfulness and meditation because you have to be aware of it. Remember how we talked about how hard it is to be aware that you're greedy. When you practice mindfulness, you start becoming aware of these subtle changes in your thinking. And you're like, why did I think of that? You know, I never thought of that before. Why would I recognize that now? And think about that now. So, yeah.
How you doing?
Not working.
Light's not working.
Heater work करी तो Sorry about the disruption.
Oh, no problem. And so, yeah, that's how we.
Check the.
That's how we can learn how to recognize it, because recognizing it is hard. Even knowing that there's a way out of the forest is hard. Oh, great. Should I do that next time?
Yep. Ask.
Okay.
What is the breaker?
That's fine. I think.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Another way that we can fight greed is to practice small forms of renunciation. So who remembers what makes us different from animals and plants and even heavenly beings and hellish beings?
We can take a vow.
We can take a vow, that's right. So one way to combat greed is to take a vow of renunciation. Now, monks and nuns take vows, but we don't have to take an extreme one like Diksha. We can take smaller ones. What's a vow you might take to combat greed in your life?
I haven't, but my mom used to have it, like she would not have more than 100 saris or whatever. She had
Yeah.
a number, and that's it. So then that kind of made herself like every time she buys something, she has to get rid of them. And I used to make kind of fun of it as a kid, like, okay, this is so silly, but now it realizes like what was the purpose of it.
Right. So, as you guys know, this class has always been about how you can improve your life via Jain teachings. Not your future life, not some other thing. Your life right now. So what can you do? How is greed? Tell me how greed is affecting your life, and tell me what an oath you might make is, or maybe a change you might make in your life, now that we know that we have to be worried about these things.
So I just want to share something. So almost since last year and a half, around the same time I started coming to this class too. I don't know. I'm sure it is because of the class and that all these talks and everything. But I have seen a change in myself. I'm more self-content. So that's why I brought up that whole conversation about self-contentment and greed.
Right.
I have been very happy. I haven't been this happy in my life than what I am in this last year and a half.
That's great.
And I think-
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And the part of it is I was always greedy, right? I always wanted a bigger house. I wanted a
Right.
pool. I wanted to travel. I wanted a better job. I wanted a bigger car. There was like a long list of what things I wanted. But I don't know what happened in last year and a half. I'm really happy with what I have.
Thank you so much.
I'm like, thank you.
Got it.
And I'm like, okay, the house I have is enough for my boys. My parents are not traveling. It's more than enough. I don't want a bigger house to take care of it. The car I have is what I wanted. I have it. So I guess I'm also at the stage in my life that where I can be happy with what I have.
Right.
So, and just being a happy in general, it has changed a lot in the quality of my life. And then again, the mindfulness comes into it, right? Okay, now every time there is a small thing too, I kind of be mindful about it. I appreciate it more. So all the small things are making my life in general very happy and better. And just
Right.
feeling itself from within, right? Like I'm so self-content, I'm so happy, makes me very proud of myself and make me feel very better.
That's great.
But
But
the
you
point
don't
is,
have to have a big house or 100 saris to be happy. Somebody could have those realizations and be happy with a smaller house than
but
you
I
have,
didn't.
right?
It didn't hit to me. And then once it did, I'm like, I don't know. Like people have worse than me and they are happy. So it's just a
Right.
click of a moment, and I'm just trying to understand how that happened. I have no
Right.
idea. But it's just like it just started happening. Like I had all these wishes and lists, and I'm like, you know what? I don't really need it. It's just
Right.
a click of a moment that happened.
Right.
And maybe it was because of, I guess, coming to the class and just kind of,
Suddenly you were
listening.
unburdened.
Yeah,
of
it's just like, yeah, why do I really want a bigger house? Why do
Yeah.
I want a better car than what I have? So now even when Piyush asks me, oh, what car you know what, you get whatever you want. I don't care now.
So now you've experienced what you'll read sometimes in the book. It's called a moment of truth, where you realize the true nature of your soul, and you can never go back. You might backslide a little bit on your spiritual progress,
That's
but since you have tasted that, or since you have seen that, you know that there is something there. You know that there's a way out of this forest, and you'll never stop looking for it because you had a little taste.
I'm scared of that though, that I might slip back.
Hmm.
Like, before, like, oh, someone bought a house and I'll start bugging people like, oh, can we start looking for a bigger house? No, I'm like, oh, great for them. I'm happy for them. I'm
Right.
genuinely happy for that.
Right.
I don't care for a bigger house because that's not something I'm looking for. But I'm kind of worried that I hope that I do not slide back off.
That's why
Yeah.
the class is so important.
Yeah.
But that's how I'm trying to find what click that switch so I can keep, refocusing on that. So
Yeah, I'm worried about that too. I'm not sure if you were here last time, but we talked about it. We talked about what happens and what you can do when you take a step backwards on the spiritual path. And so, yeah, if you weren't here, then check it out on our website. You can go to our
Okay.
website and listen to that. But yeah, I am very worried about that too.
So for me, I mean, again, something that I've picked up from this class when we were setting up goals, one of my goals was to take a walk, either with my family or by myself. And I've been very diligent about doing that whenever I get an opportunity. And that exercise has become like a brain dumping exercise for me of all these kind of thoughts.
Right.
Because they do come to my mind, no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
But then the walking exercise is when I actually churn through that and then poof, I throw it out of my wish list.
Yeah, that's what we call walking meditation.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah,
That's
walking
exactly what
meditation.
it is.
A lot of people love that. A lot of people do it without knowing that there's a name for it.
That's right.
Or without caring. And so that's great. Anybody else? What do you think you can do to eliminate some greed from your life? Is there an oath you can take? Is there something? Well, first you have to recognize what are causing these thoughts of greed in your life.
I would start working on my eating habits.
Yeah.
I would think that that's what has been going on since a month in my mind, to stop having food after sunset, like how Jainism.
Great.
So that may stop me from getting attracted to food, which is the main start of everything. Like
Yeah.
I feel the tongue is something that needs to have that
Right.
limitations. So that is what I will definitely start working on.
Great. Jainism invented intermittent fasting. Did you know
Yeah,
that?
yeah, I know. I used to do that, and since I was young, my mom used to close the kitchen at 7 o'clock, no matter what, and that has been there. But since here with the any routine that comes in during weekend, but I have to be so mindful that throughout the weekends, I should not change. Like it should be the same.
Okay.
That I'll try my best to be. Yeah.
That's great. So that's great. So it's similar to a vow that we take, and when you start doing it and when you start realizing, oh, I lived like that when I was younger, you realize you can do it again. And then what happens is you start noticing, well, if I can do it that much, then I can do it more. And then you start being liberated from, that's the whole point of why we fast and all that, right? To try to be liberated from our desires for food.
So if you eat, like let's say you do fast, but if you don't take the vow, does that count?
It counts, but it counts less. And when we say count, what we mean is, well, how much karma am I burning, right? Or how much samvar am I doing, right? So it does count. But if you take a vow and you exercise that, it counts more. But what's more important than you burning more karma because you took an oath? What's more important is you realize you took an oath and you can keep it.
Yeah.
What happens after that is you start, well, what else? What other kind of oaths can I keep? Because you feel good about it. And then you keep taking oaths and you keep doing it, and that leads you further on the spiritual path.
Good dopamine.
Yeah. How you doing? Come on in.
Yeah.
So I told you that story to tell you this story. In my line of work, I see a lot of families ripped apart because of greed. And that's due to inheritance. And these are not big amounts of money. Even a small amount of money, I've seen brothers, 50 years old, ripped apart, not talking to each other. I was their go-between because they would get angry when they talked with each other. Because of this inheritance thing. And so I need you guys to get your wills and trusts and estates squared away now. Because everybody thinks something different is fair. There's no fair. I'll just give you a small example. You have two siblings. One has kids, the other doesn't have kids. One has 2 kids, the other one has no kids. The parents die. One kid thinks the money should be split 50-50 between the siblings. One kid thinks the money should be split 4 ways. 1 for each grandkid, 1 for the sibling, and 1 for the other sibling. So 3/4 to one family and 1/4 to another family. One person outside of the family thinks the money should just be given to the grandkids. Another person, another aunt or uncle, thinks a little bit more money should be given to the sibling with the kids, but don't give the money to the kids directly, but just give a little bit more because they have kids. Another cousin says, you should have given a little bit more to the one without kids because they don't have any kids, and I feel sorry for them. There is no right answer here. This is the simplest kind of inheritance I could give you. There is no right answer for you. And you can see how it involves anger, ego, deceit, and greed. Okay? And just this tiny amount of money, I give this one kid, 60% instead of 50% because they have 2 kids and I want some money to go to the kids. You know how powerful that is a message when you're not there to explain yourself? And then the kids are trapped in between this thing. And then somebody says, why are you fighting? It's such a little amount of money. It's just 10% of the money. And what do you mean, why am I fighting? It's the principle of the thing. I don't care about the money. And if you didn't care about the money, then why didn't you give me the money? If you say you don't care about the money, then why are you arguing over 10% of the money? Okay, this will rip your family apart because of greed. Okay, so I need you to get it squared away right now. You might think, I don't have anything. You're wrong. Your family will be ripped apart even if you don't have anything. And that's, I think, one of the main ways that you can stop this from happening in your family. Is if you have a discussion with your family, with your kids, this is what we decided. This is why we decided it. You get their input. You show them the documents. You tell them where the documents are. You put them in the file folder or email it to them or whatever. I know it's a pain, right? You got to get it signed and you got to get it drafted and you got to pay $1,000 or whatever to do it. And you got to go get it notarized or whatever. And I don't have the time to go get it. It's a pain, okay? But you got to do it because this will rip your family apart. This kind of greed will rip your family apart.
Okay, who provides those services in our Jain center?
Yeah, we need to know. Yeah, we need to know somebody that could do it. They'll have 20 new clients right here. Right? Does anybody have their own experience with inheritance? Well, good. I'm glad, because a lot of times it's a bad experience.
Yeah, but I'll share like one of my. No, I've not had direct experience, but like my dad's side of the family, they're a huge family. There were like 8 brothers and 5 sisters, and now my dad is the sole guy standing. The brother before him, he was the oldest brother, and they did not have any kids. So my aunt first passed away, and then my uncle passed away, and they had no kids, but they had collected a lot of fortune. And when they died, I was hearing news about all these family members coming together as to what do we do, how do we grab what they had and all of that.
Right.
And this uncle had not written any will or none of that.
Right.
So it was a complete mess, and the true colors of certain people came out.
Right.
I'm like, this thing does not belong to any of you. It's gone.
Yeah.
Just live with that. So, but that was a very eye-opening experience for some of the people who were like, I couldn't believe, like, a person like you, there was a complete shift of what I thought about people before and after.
Right.
When that happened. So I've been through the experience, not directly in my close-knit family, but because of this uncle that I had, and you're completely right. Like it's especially these things, they're so messy, and it just brings the wrong side of us as human beings to a point. And the root, the whole topic of greed, it got my attention because of that thing that some of my family members or distant family members actually went through. Because to your point, the root cause of that evil was greed.
Right.
In all of them.
Yeah.
So.
And remember, what is the definition of stealing? Does anybody remember? One of the vows we take is not to steal, right? But what does stealing mean?
Take something that doesn't belong to you.
Very close. It's to take something that was not freely given to you.
Yeah.
And that's what I didn't understand. So if you find money on the ground, if you pick it up, is that stealing? Yes.
Yeah.
I couldn't understand that for a long time until I had to realize this is a broader definition of stealing, right? To take something that is not freely given to you is stealing. And so in this example, this is stealing. When you just, if somebody dies and there's no clear where to go, if you take the money, it is stealing. And it is a violation of one of the vows that we take, and your karma, your soul will get that appropriate karma that goes along with it.
So now we need to find someone who can write a will.
Right.
I know. And in this case, I was actually proud of my dad in this whole example that I gave. Ultimately, because according to the law in India, he is the next in line technically, because the only brother left, and somehow our whether it's right or wrong, the Indian law is like the brother, long lost standing brother gets it. But my dad was like, I don't care. Just let it be. I don't want to deal with this thing at all. And all the cousins are coming together and asking my dad to push this. I'm like, my dad is like, this does not belong to any of you. Just shut up and go away.
Right.
Which I was like, that was the right stand to take,
Right. So now that we know this, and now that we've talked about, well, maybe I can do these 1 or 2 things to change my life for the better, how do we teach our kids about it? Because one of the things about kids is like you constantly teach them something and then you tell them to do the exact opposite. So like we try to teach them how to talk and we baby them in these words, and then we try to teach them how to be quiet, right? And then we try to teach them how to be a good person and do this and do that, and then we have to teach them, well, all these people around here are trying to take advantage of you, so you can't be a good person. You can't give your money away or something like that, right? So one of the things is we try to teach them about money, and then we try to do this, and you need to get a good job, and that's why you need to go to college, right? But then on top of that, after that, we try to teach, money is a sin. Don't worry too much about money. Don't be too attached to money. We always do this, and that's why our kids are so messed up, and that's why we're so messed up, because we tell them one thing or we teach them one thing, and then we say, actually, the right thing to do is the exact opposite of that. So what do we teach our kids about greed? Or how do we get them to understand?
I think contentment is, if they understand the true value of contentment, which in fact all of us are also trying to get there, but once you realize that contentment can actually give you longer or lasting happiness than what you could get by getting say this kind of money. So I think if we start from there and let the kids know that yes, money is important, but that is not the only thing in life, because I know a lot of our kids are going through the phase where they're either entering the high school or those who have passed out of high school and going into college, the kind of selections they make. I mean, these kids at this age are already thinking about what career will give them what kind of money. So, and then, I mean, the kind of questions they ask and the thought process that goes behind those questions or decision making is mind-boggling, meaning at that age. So I think contentment would be the first thing to start with, to let them know that as I think Poonam was saying, it once you realize that after you have achieved certain things in life, everything is then going to be, I mean,
but only after, not during. So it's easy for rich people to say that money doesn't matter, right?
No, so that's what I said. Money is important, but it is not the only thing. Meaning, you need to have that balance.
Be more mindful.
Yeah, as to how you're earning that money and whether that is at the expense of working 80 hours a week versus working 40 or 50 hours a week. Mm-hmm. That's the whole thing.
Right. Other ways we can teach our kids about, well, there is that balance to be struck.
Well, with the younger kids, you're talking about people who are like planning for careers, but younger kids, the way that I noticed there's the typical like fashion trends, what people are wearing. Are you wearing Lululemon? Are you wearing Nike?
Yeezys.
Are you wearing Yeezys?
The
right?
standing water bottles, man.
This is the type of slide that everyone's wearing this
Slides,
year,
yeah.
right? So it's a different trend. So I think the showing by example with the kids that the brand and what you're showing off is not the important things in life, right? So when parents are buying houses, when they're buying cars, they can afford a Mercedes or a Lamborghini or whatever, right? But you're like, hey, we're not buying those things because it doesn't matter to us what people see us in. We're buying something that is functionally, important for the size of the family that we have, and we want heated seats, might get a little bit better trim. But that's about trying to show by example. But I always try to de-emphasize the brands and the show and make a point to point it out so that they also understand that that's not the important thing in their social circles is what you're wearing.
Right.
Yeah.
One of the things that we might try is to give them money, put money in their hand, and ask them to donate it.
Yeah.
Because it's a very different feeling when you have it in your hand and when you have the ability to make a choice whether to donate it or not. We might get in the practice of having them donate money so they understand how it feels. So it's like a muscle you can exercise, this donation thing. And the more you do it, the easier it is to do. It's very hard to do it at first because you're like, well, this is my money and I work for this money or whatever, It's very hard. But the more you do it, the easier it becomes. And the more you feel good about it. Some people say, well, you rationalize feeling good about it, but I don't care. You still feel good about it. And so I think that might be a good way to combat greed in our children, is to do that.
They already run that program, don't they, through the Pashala? Like, if you come for the morning prayer, then they give you, and then the next class they bring around like a donation folder for like helping animals or whatever.
Yeah, and I think that's great because the donation is not forced. They can keep it if they want.
Yeah.
But then they feel good about it, and then they decide, and then they hand over the check, and they feel good about it. I think it's a great program. I think we can do that at home.
Also, exposure to less fortunate, if they see, then that also kind of helps.
Right.
Yeah, it shouldn't be just the money; it should be the time.
Donating the time
Mhm.
to
Yeah.
volunteer.
That's a very
Actually,
good
like go because
That's
doing
the
the
real
donation is good and it's something to get them in the habit of learning how to do. But it's a different thing when you're in that environment and you're giving your time.
The ultimate currency, time.
Questions or comments about anything we talked about today? So now we know why greed is the final boss of Jainism. Why is anger the easiest, or why is deceit more than ego? Why is deceit higher than ego? To me, I thought ego should be at the end when I first heard about it. Because I have an ego, and that's my issue to work with. But why is it harder to stop lying and being deceitful than it is to stop being prideful or stop doing that? Does anybody have any insight there? So some of the same reasons. Deceit is more hidden. Pride is actually anger is the easiest to spot in yourself. Pride is a little bit harder, but not as hard. Deceit is actually a little bit harder to spot in yourself, just like greed. So that's one of the reasons. That's a similar reason. Another reason is that deceit involves your mind and your speech. So ego is usually just your mind. Okay. Deceit is you can tell lies. So because it involves both, that's why it's a little bit harder to get rid of. Ego is mostly internal. It affects your thoughts and your attitudes. But deceit is internal and external because you have to mentally plan to lie, then you have to physically do the process of lying, and then you have to sustain those lies with further lies. So it's this compounding effect that ego doesn't have.
So deceit can be unintentional, unknowingly too, right? I mean, you're not trying to be like that, but it's just unknowingly you're doing it. You're trying to hide or conceal the information. For example, I see it all the time in the moms. They don't want to share the resources what their kids did with other parents because, I don't know, it's not like my kid is competing with your kid. He's competing against himself, right?
Right.
But I guess it's concealing the information. Is that also deceit?
Yes. Certainly concealing information is deceit. That's certainly. It's an interesting question whether you can lie unintentionally. I'm not sure.
It's just
I
holding
think the
off
answer
of
is
the
yes.
I'll tell
information.
you another example, right? Like for example, sometimes let's say my wife has made some dal, right? And she's put unknowingly a little bit more salt in the dal. But I have it, she asked for feedback, and I'm like, it's awesome, I love it. Right? Because it doesn't change,
Right.
for me, it doesn't make a big difference per se, but
Right.
generally from what I'm used to, it's a little bit more. But have I been deceitful to her?
No, you haven't, because you have spoken to prevent violence. So that is actually not allowed. You might not know it, but because the definition. Remember how we talked about the definition of stealing is a lot more expensive. The definition of lying is not what you think lying is. Okay, the definition of lying is if you tell a quote unquote lie in order to decrease the amount of violence that is happening, it is actually not a lie. You are not lying. Okay?
Right.
So remember that. That's very important.
So I always say the food is awesome.
Yes.
It doesn't matter how
I believe in non-violence.
Right. But I am not sure. I am interested in that question if anybody wants to look it up. Can you lie unintentionally? I think the answer might be yes.
Yes,
I think
I
you
think
think
so.
the answer is no. But yeah, I don't know
Like-
the answer to that.
Many times when kids were younger, like to avoid certain situations for
Yeah.
them to get hurt or anything, it's very, which we shouldn't do, but it's very easy to tell them, oh, this is, if someone wants to buy, a child wants to buy that, we will say, oh, that's too spicy or
Right.
it won't suit you or something.
Yeah.
Where I'm lying, but I feel like I'm protecting the child, but
Right.
actually
Good intent.
I should take efforts to make them understand why we are not doing that or something. but that time we don't realize in a moment of rush or
It's
something,
unintentional.
or
Because it's so easy.
maybe find a shortcut to
Yeah.
deal with that situation. I feel now that I did that a lot, but that time we don't understand that we're doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we don't understand the repercussions that has sometimes as well. So just like why we talked about greed was the final boss of Jainism, deceit is higher than ego because deceit fuels the other passions more. Deceit fuels ego, and sometimes it's the other way around, but not usually. For example, you can pretend to be humble when you're not humble, right? So that's a lie. Deceit is used to justify anger and ego. We lie to ourselves a lot, and that is one of the hardest forms of deceit. You may not have realized that that's included in deceit, but it includes the lies you tell yourself, which is very difficult to let go of, because when we start not telling ourselves those lies, we are forced to face very uncomfortable truths that we would rather not about ourselves, about how we may be short of the person that we want to be. So similar reasons, deceit is harder to recognize than ego, and deceit binds karma more strongly than ego. So if you want to try to understand, well, why are they in these order, and why is one harder to get rid of than the other, I thought it would be the other way around. These are the common reasons why they're presented in that order. Questions or comments about anything we talked about today? This is our new room going forward. So let's plan to meet here whenever we have class. They wanted to use that room for another one. And so now we know how to turn the lights back on and stuff whenever they go out.
You think
That's
we can
good.
find some space to put some of this storage so we can just have more seating area?
Yeah, I think that would be good. I think that we can move some of this stuff to the back and maybe organize it a little bit,
Yeah.
and then yeah, that way we could.
Maybe
Are we
we
allowed
can
to move
stack the
these things?
tables on
Yeah.
top of
Yeah,
each
we
other.
can move.
Like stack them upside down.
Yeah, we can definitely do that. Questions or comments about anything we talked about today? Thank you for coming. I know we had a super long break. I was in charge of some of that, and I wasn't in charge of some of that, and I'm sorry about that. Thanks to our new faces that are coming, and all our old regulars that are coming. I really appreciate that, and I really appreciate the time that you give me. I wish I could spend longer with you, but I only get an hour a week, and I'd like you to think about how you can apply Jain concepts to your life to improve the quality of your life. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah.